Okay, so this week's Haftorah is sort of the end of a story about Haftorot that started last week. And it's hard to remember what we were doing last Tuesday, but it was in fact still Yantif, Acharon Shel Pesach. And so we did not have a Haftarah shir. So I want to back us up a little bit to last week to talk about how we chose the Haftarah for this week and for last week and some of the ramifications. And then we will look a little bit at our Haftarah too. The Haftarah debate is much more exciting to me than the Haftarah itself sometimes. I shouldn't have recorded that. But I find the history behind it really interesting. So the first thing that I've brought us is a discussion about which Haftarah we should read now. And I apologize for the rusty English translation. It is my translation here. I couldn't find an easy, fast English translation. So the Shulchan Aruch does not talk about a lot of Haftorot, right? There's nowhere in the like codified law that says this Haftarah for this week, this one for this week. And in fact, there are many differences between different communities that only get smoothed out relatively recently in our history. And the question of what you do when you read a double parsha is addressed sort of as like a general rule in the Shulchan Aruch. And the Ramah tells us that the minhag is kisvara harishona uveshar shabbatot hashana maftirin me'ein haparsha. So the Torah tells us that we read the Haftarah that resembles the parsha. But there's a question, right? Kashakorin shtei parshiot, right? When you have read two parshiot, which haftarah do you choose? Maftirim ba'achrona. Generally, we say you read the second one. So if this week and last week had been joined, if it wasn't a leap year, we would have read, you would think, the haftarah for Achrei Mot, this week's haftarah, of Kedoshim, this week's haftarah. Yes, Tamar, please. Oh, you're muted. I can see you talking, but I can't hear you.
Like I had a question. What do they mean by the kushim? Halokivnei hakushim.
Oh, great. Okay, that I'm about to get to that. It's a great question. But first, so right, so the Mordechai, according to the Ramah brings us the Mordechai, which says if there are two parshiot together, like if this was not a leap year, Achrei Mot Kedoshim, we would read the second Haftorah. That might be because we want it to flow more smoothly, right? Whatever we talk about in Kedoshim is sort of fresh in our mind, so we'll read that Haftarah. And then what it tells us, what the Ramah tells us, ubilvad. Last week was a special week, had it been joined. Ba'achrei mot ukadoshim, the maftirin halo kivnei kushim, shehi haftarat achrei mot. So just like we call Vayikra because the first word of the Haftarah is Vayikra, the way that the Haftorot are referred to in the halacha are by the first distinguishable words of the Haftorah. So halo kivnei kushim is what they call the Haftorah for Achrei Mot, which comes from Emor, and those are the first sort of not generic words like Vayadaber or whatever. So halo kivnei kushim is last week's Haftorah, and we'll see in a few minutes. I can't remember. Hatishpot is what we call this week's Haftarah. Right, so it's like more wordy than the parshiot, but it's the same general principle. So what the Ramah is telling us, without any explanation, is that you generally read the Haftarah of the second parsha, but the one exception to this rule is Achrei Mot Kedoshim, and you should read the Haftarah of Achrei Mot instead. So the Mishnah Berurah, commenting on the Ramah, tries to help give us some context for why that would be. So he says, Shehi haftarat achrei mot, mipnei haftarah shel parsha shniya mazkaret mitoavat Yerushalayim. So he says, well, this week's haftarah, which we will see, is a really hard haftarah. It talks about all of the abominations that the inhabitants of Jerusalem wrought. Masha ein ken kashen nifradot shekvar karu halo kivnei kushim b'parshat achrei mot b'achrach lehaftir b'parshat kadoshim hatishpot. So what he's saying here, I think, is fascinating. And it's the reason that I am bringing it here, is he's saying, when we have read the two parshiot separately, we read this beautiful haftarah from Amos, which we'll see a little bit of, for Parshat Achrei Mot, and then we're sort of ready. We're like buffered by the haftarah from Amos to read this much more difficult morally difficult or sort of, sad Haftarah of Hatishbot, which comes for Kedoshim. So I think what the Mishnah Berurah is saying is that we need Amos to be able to read this Yechezkel. It's too hard to read without some kind of like pep talk the week before. So if the two parshiot are together, you will read the Haftarah of Achrei Mot. But once you've read the Haftarah of Achrei Mot last week, you can sort of be ready to brace yourself for the difficulties of this week's Haftarah. Is that clear? More or less.
Can you just summarize it in one or two sentences? I'm confused. I couldn't keep up with all the.
Okay, so when Achrei Mot and Kedoshim, when they come together in one package, generally we would not read the Haftarah of Achrei Mot. That's the first parsha. We would read the Haftarah of Kedoshim. But the Haftarah of Kedoshim is not a pleasant Haftarah. And so the Mishnah Berurah is saying that we can only read the Haftarah of Kedoshim if the week prior we read the Haftarah of Achrei Mot. Because Achrei Mot's Haftarah is like an inoculation against the difficulties of the Haftarah of Kedoshim.
Okay.
Is that better? If it's not,
okay.
Tell me.
Yeah. Okay. You wrap it all up together. Yeah. Okay.
Right. So when you have the double parsha and you don't get the benefit of the Haftarah of Achrei Mot, the Ramah and the Mishnah Berurah say you need to just read the Haftarah of Achrei Mot. Kedoshim is too hard to go into blind without the reassurances of Achrei Mot. And in fact, down here he says that the Bach and the Shah write that the minhag is in all congregations is like that of the Ramah. And so the din, v'hu hadin im Shabbat parsha Achrei Mot is erev Rosh Chodesh. So this didn't happen this year, but let's say, right, Rosh Chodesh is tomorrow and Thursday, but let's say it was Sunday. Then we would have read that special Haftarah that we read very early on in the year about Yonatan and David, the Machar HaChodesh. I don't know if you remember, but right, if Rosh Chodesh comes on a Sunday, you read a special Haftarah for Achrei Mot. And so the Bach says, if you read that special Haftarah for Achrei Mot, then you still read the Achrei Mot Haftarah the following week. Meaning the Mishnah Berurah does not want you to have to ever read the Haftarah of Kedoshim without reading the Haftarah of Achrei Mot first. I see Jerry nodding. Hopefully it's kind of clear. What I think is fascinating about this is this concern that the Haftarah is too difficult, but yet seems to be necessary, right? If it's so difficult, why didn't we just pick a different Haftarah for Kedoshim? I don't think of Kedoshim as a difficult parsha, so I was kind of surprised to find that they picked such a difficult counterweight to the parsha reading in a difficult Haftarah. But also, like, why do we have to read any hard Haftarah? Let's read a nice Haftarah. But instead of reading a nice Haftarah, the Ashkenazi poskim sort of tie themselves in knots trying to help us read a nice Haftarah before a hard Haftarah. So it's a huge exception to the rule, which I think is interesting also. And it seems to be like a lot of legwork to avoid reading a hard Haftarah, when it seems to me that they picked the Haftarot. Couldn't they have picked a better one? But we go so far as to say, if on the Shabbat of Achrei Mot we end up reading some other Haftarah and not Amos, then we're not going to read the Haftarah of Kedoshim the next week. So I wasn't sure if everyone had gone to shul last week or if you had paid attention during the Haftarah, but I felt like we had to look at a little bit of Amos because this is our strengthening, shielding agent to reading the hard Haftarah of this week. So I just brought these two psukim. Sorry, there's a little bit of a typo here. It's chapter 9, verses 13 to 14. The Haftarah goes from from Pasuk Zayin. But here it's just very beautiful. You can sort of see why the poskim felt like this would be a nice thing to read before a hard Haftarah, right? V'shavti et shvut ami Yisrael uvanu arim neshamot v'yashavu v'nat'u kramim v'shatu et yenam v'asu ganot v'achlu et pirehem. I will restore my people, Israel, God says. They shall rebuild ruined cities and inhabit them. They shall plant vineyards and drink their wine. They shall till gardens and eat their fruit. I think to me, this felt very poignant as I was listening. I was at a bar mitzvah. I was listening to the bar mitzvah boy read this. I got like a little bit emotional. It just felt to me very much a beautiful promise at this moment when there is so much that is ruined in Israel, that there is this promise that God has given the people that we will rebuild, we will re-inhabit, we will replant, we'll be able to be at a place where we can eat and drink in peace and prosperity. Unata'atim al admatam v'lo yinatshu od me'al admatam asher natati lahem amar Hashem Elokecha. And I will plant them, right? And we will be like plants upon their soil, never more to be uprooted from the soil I have given them, said the eternal your God. So again, Amos is beautiful. Yeah, Tamar, please.
I was thinking that part of this, the first part of this has come true already. When the coming up of Israel, the state of Israel, the fact that we have in Israel, that happened.
Yeah.
All those things happened. Ruined cities were rebuilt and inhabited, vineyards were planted, gardens and so on. And we can only pray now that the second part, never to be uprooted, that will come true as well.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I think when we think next week, a week from today will be Yom Ha'atzmaut, and I believe that the practice in our shul is to say Hallel with a bracha, right? Certainly there's some debate, but I agree with you. I think that when we say Hallel with a bracha, you're saying the verses of Amos came true when we built the state of Israel, and that is something worth saying the bracha of Hallel for. You're right, and I think that the worry of being uprooted is very real right now. And so it's nice to think about if these verses work together, then, it's coming for us, never being uprooted again. And it's really a beautiful thing. And so this is how we leave the Haftarah last week. We leave it with this beautiful, strong statement about us inhabiting the land of Israel, about all of like the problems of us sinning and God being angry and being abandoned, and all of like the story of Eicha, right? It all is sort of, I don't want to say forgotten, but we're able to move to a better place. So now that we've received our courage and our strength, that is not true about our Haftarah. Our Haftarah is very difficult. It's from the Sefer Yechezkel. There are several chapters. This is towards the end of the chapters of Yechezkel that are difficult. But when I was looking, I read this lovely 929 essay, Ezekiel and the Torah, which you can click on here, by Dr. Moshe Saklau. And he mentions this fascinating idea, which I had not heard, which is described in several places in the Gemara, but this is just but one of them, where it seems like the rabbis were deeply uncomfortable with the Sefer Yechezkel, because there were some differences, perhaps, in the way, right? It says, what do they say? They say, Shahayu dvarav sotrim divrei Torah, that there was somehow he contradicted the words of the Torah. And I think we didn't talk a lot about it, but I think I maybe alluded to it when we were in a different Haftarah of Yechezkel, where Yechezkel describes a different seder korbanot than is described in Vayikra. And so the rabbis turn themselves in a lot of circles there too to say, oh, well, he didn't mean this, he meant that. But it's a little bit unclear. Is this what Yechezkel thought should be? Is this what was actually happening, in his memory or his recent memory? But it was scary to them, right? And so the rabbis wanted to suppress, they wanted to put away the book of Yechezkel, almost like banning a book, or God forbid, book burning, right? But Rav Yehuda says, well, actually, there was this one person who is Zachor Oto Ha'ish Latov, that we remember him for good. His name was Hanania ben Chizkiah. My son's middle name is Hanania, so I already start with a predisposition towards liking him. Hananya ben Chazkiah, why was he considered so good? Because ma'asa, what did he do? Ha'elu lo shlosh me'ot garbei shemen ve'yashav ba'aliyah v'darash. He called for a lot of oil so that he could just sit, right? He was basically saying, pay the electric bill for the next month. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to look at Yechezkel and I'm going to look at the Torah. And this is the Rashi to reconcile its teachings with the Torah. And I think that perhaps what the Mishnah is saying, what the Gemara is saying here, is not necessarily that it has to be reconciled, but that it has to be, we have to come to terms with difficult texts, right? What did the vast majority of rabbis want to do with Yechezkel, which made them uncomfortable? Possibly because it's so difficult, also because there are contradictions. They wanted to just get rid of it, to suppress it. And our Gemara celebrates someone who says we need to sit with hard things just as much as we sit with easy things. And so I think, even though this is not the point of the Gemara Chagiga, I think what I took from here, thinking about the earlier discussion about, which Haftarah do you read? Why do we read a hard Haftarah? Is that sometimes we have to sit with hard texts, and maybe sometimes they are comforting at different times, or it's important to remember the times that we have done the wrong thing. So it seems like this week's Haftarah, how does it connect to our Parsha? He says here, right? He says it seems like the list of charges brought against her, being Jerusalem, is drawn largely from our Parsha, from Leviticus 18 to 20, and also from Devarim. And Rav Yosef Kara, the younger colleague of Rashi, whose commentaries we've encountered previously, matches each charge to its source. So that is what I thought we would do with our last few minutes here. Oops, sorry, I was sloppy in my chart editing here. So it's a little bit perhaps hard to follow, but this is the Parsha, so from Kedoshim on this side, and this is the Haftarah from Yechezkel on this side, right? So in our Parsha, we read, Ish imo v'aviv tira'u, that you shall each revere your mother and your father. And then we read in the Haftarah, Av v'em hekalu bach, that fathers and mothers have been humiliated within you. Right. So it's like if Yechezkel was the prosecutor building a case against Bnei Israel, he's saying, look, the law was clear. You need to revere your parents. What has happened? You've embarrassed your parents. You've done the opposite of what we were meant to do. Right. Ve'et shabtotai tishmaru, and keep my Shabbat. And then here, kadshai bazit ve'et shabtotai chilalt, right? That you've profaned my Shabbat. So Kedoshim, as I said earlier, it's a lovely parsha, right? It charges us to be holy. It gives us a roadmap for achieving that holiness. And the Haftarah is like the hard truth. Despite the roadmap, despite the really clear direction, we fell down on the job. We didn't revere our parents. We humiliated them. We didn't keep the Shabbat. We profaned it. And then the last one I brought in, he does cite the full list here. Lo telech rachil ba'amecha, lo ta'amod al dam re'echa, ani Hashem. Do not deal basely with members of your people. Do not profit by the blood of your fellow. And then on our side, and it even uses, right, the same word as if to say, right, don't lo telech rachil. What do we have in our parsha? Anshe rachil. We've become so base. We've become so poor in our interactions with other people that it's not just an action. It's like part of who we are, right? Anshe rachil hayubach laman shafach dam. They were intent on shedding blood, right? So we're not supposed to ta'amod al dam re'echa here. They are intent on shedding blood. Vel harim achlu bach lima asu b'tochach, right? And they've practiced depravity in your midst. And so the Haftarah is, maybe this is the wrong audience for this, but sometimes they show these videos on Facebook where it says like where it started, how it's going, right? People will post like a baby picture of their child and then their bar mitzvah photo. And so I feel like the Parsha is where it started. This like sparkling, beautiful new nation in infancy, getting the roadmap to do beautiful work for Hashem. And then how it's going is not the bar mitzvah picture. It's the picture of us sitting in a jail cell, right? It's the picture of us having done all the bad things. And so it's not an easy Haftarah. You can see why, if this is what we're reading, right? These are basically some of the middle verses of our Haftarah. When's our Haftarah? Is 1 to 19, right? So this is exactly almost the middle. It's not a happy middle. The whole thing is like this, and there's not a happy end, right? Often the end is like, despite all the bad things, I am your God and I will take you out. And that does not happen in our Haftarah. That's not the way it's cut for our Haftarah. And so I think that it is understandable that the Ramah was so adamant that we not read this without also reading this. If we were going to miss Amos, we weren't going to subject ourselves to this piece of Yechezkel and Shul. So, I think there's something interesting about sort of the play between reading hard texts when they're a part of our tradition and also making good choices about how to do that. And I think that there's something there in the Yom HaZikaron, Yom HaAtzmaut sequence, which we're about to observe, because in some ways it's the opposite, right? We read the Yechezkel and then the Amos, so to speak. We do the hard part of mourning for those that have fallen, and then we celebrate the state that we have today. But I think that the idea of balancing, of realizing that we can't have one without the other, is really important. And so I saw this debate sort of echoed in the way that we choose to celebrate our calendar year. And I hope that when we have to read the Yechezkel, that we are buffered by the Amos and that we're able to turn back and say, we remember Hashem's promise, so we can look really with full look at the hard things that we've done, knowing that lo yinatshu, right, that we will not be uprooted again from the land of Israel, and that we have this to lean back on, to rely on, to give us strength to do the hard things too. But I welcome questions, comments, ideas. I'm going to stop the share so we can all see each other better.
No, I thought it was beautiful the way Amos' piece came out. But I was thinking, if you are in the heat of the battle, you are in Gaza, you are in slavery, you are in Egypt, if you don't have a hope to see all this vision that he had, the planting the gardens, the fruit, etc., what comes the promised land, what's the point of being here or giving your life for Israel? This is what I'm struggling for. So one thing or the other, the bad and the good cannot live isolated. You need the dialectic connection between the two opposites.
Yeah.
What Jewishness is all about.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this like funny Haftarah debate, I agree with you. It really encapsulates a much broader principle within our Jewish experience.
Yeah. It's like the page of the Talmud. There are two rabbis fighting always in different places, in different times, and they're both right. So how in every generation there's a new interpretation that moves us forward. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to put it all together. It's hard.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm thinking as you're talking, Nelson, that in some way it's like it's the incentive, right? Sometimes you have to do the hard things to get back to the good thing, right? I know every week I say I don't want to talk about Israel, but I think it's very complicated and hard things are happening. And I'm not saying that all things are justified by a promise to return to the lands, but I think that we have to, when you keep your eye on that, it can give you the strength to do hard things and also to look at them and hopefully change them when that's necessary. Maybe that's the balanced way to say it.
Let's keep the eye on the prize. So.
Yes, exactly. So if Amos was the prize, I just felt like I couldn't let it go and go to Yechezkel since we didn't have class last Tuesday. So now we have the prize and the difficult pieces, and may we hold them in each hand and have a balanced life.
Yeah. When I read the bottom of your source on Amos, I thought, oh, I wish I could go back and start all over again. So now I know what I'm struggling for. Now it's worth it. It's worth the effort.
Yes, that's right. It's worth the effort. I mean, all right. Well, I hope everyone has a good rest of your week. And for those that are able, I hope to see you in Shul on Sunday night for Yom HaZikaron. The tekes will be at 7:20 following Mincha at 7, and On Yom Ha'atzmaut, there will be a party from 5 to 7 with Israeli dancing, Krav Maga, singing, and falafel. And I think we have to lean into both the mourning and the partying, the celebrating, you know, in an enthusiastic way this year to really work through all of the emotions that, you know, bubble up during hard times. So I hope to see you there, and I wish you a Shabbat Shalom, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you. Thank
Yes,
you.
yeah.
Thank you. Be well, guys.